textbook to test kind of teaching and learning. Right, so I'm going to go through what we are talking about, why we're talking about this, who this is for, which theories, which education theories defend this sort of setup. This is very important, especially if you're trying to break through barriers at your institutions, how we implement this sort of teaching and learning, and how we assess it. Okay, if you've got any questions as we go, please feel free to ask. It's very informal, so I don't mind chatting. I don't think we're going to use the whole hour, hopefully not. Okay, so we're talking about digital portfolios of learning evidence. Essentially, we are allowing students to create their own learning path and give evidence that they have followed this learning path. To give evidence that they have understood what the module content is about. But the innovation that I brought to this field was the online interview assessment that is paired with this portfolio of learning evidence. And it's very important why we have the two together. And I'll explain this a little bit later. Okay, why are we talking about this? This is the important, one of the most important slides here. You will find nowadays there's a certain apathy in our student body. They really don't care. They're not here to learn anything. They're here to get their degrees, right? We don't really understand what education is anymore. Education to a student is different to the definition of education, the education of a lifelong learner, for example. So students are here to get their degrees, to get a job, to get money, to pull themselves out of poverty in most circumstances. Right. So students are stressed. They come to university. They've got a job to do to get their degree. They're stressed. They might not be up to this whole learning thing. And they are given an education system that presents them with examinations like they have at school. So they carry on doing what they did at school, which is cramming. They have a nice time during the semester, and then before tests and exams, they cram. And they try to memorize as much as they can and regurgitate it in the traditional types of assessments. Now, for a lot of really good reasons, students are not retaining any of this information from year to year. And how do we know this? Well, I can ask you, what if you were to give your students the exact same test or examination after a vacation or a recess, right? Without telling them to prepare for that reassessment? Okay, probably most of your class would not be able to pass that same assessment, that very same assessment, just a few weeks or a couple of months after they took that assessment for real. And this shows that they are not retaining information. Now, it can be argued, and I would agree that it's the case, that if you cram something and you forget it, that at least the second time you learn it, it will come a little easier. But I mean, that's how the brain works. Then you do this 3 or 4 times over a period of 5 years, and you might actually remember something. Okay, we want this to happen within a module, within a semester. Okay, and like I said before, they come from a system where they gamed the assessment. So this was for matric exams. They were told, okay, if you practiced past papers, you will understand what the assessments are about or what they are like. So they gamed it to get very high marks without education being a priority or learning being a priority at all. And the evidence for this is that they will ask you before every test, what is the scope of the test, right? What questions can we expect? How do you want us to answer particular questions? So you know that they are gaming it because it's the path of least resistance, right? It doesn't, they haven't studied, you know, for the past few weeks. Now they've got to study for a test or an exam. They need help gaming the system. Another way to to game the system is to use past papers, right? They know that lecturers don't have the time to create unique assessments each and every time. So they can get a feel for how one is assessed in this class by looking at past papers. All right. Another problem is that I would prefer to have workplace-like assessments, or if you don't know where your students are going to work and you don't know how they would be assessed in the workplace, have some graduate attribute-specific assessments. So for example, if you know your students are going to go out with the graduate attributes of communication, right, then why are you making them write a written exam? They should be communicating. In drama, if they are going out to theaters to perform, why are they doing a written examination? Okay, so graduate attribute specific assessments, if you don't know where your students are definitely going to be, and if you know where they're going to be, find out how the employees in these places are assessed, how their performance is managed. Okay, do they provide reports? Do they do presentations? That sort of thing. That is the way we should be assessing. We don't write exams to get our next paycheck. When last did we have 15 minutes to prove a proof we've never seen before in order to get our next paycheck? Nowhere. So why do we make our students do this? But even more important for me is that the setting of exams and tests, because I know that they will never see these things again, the setting of tests and exams and marking these tests and exams was absolutely soul destroying for me, right? No one after university is going to have their work marked line by anybody else in their business, right? And have, you know, and get the feedback, oh, this line was wrong. Oh, you missed a decimal point here, so you lost half. It doesn't happen. This is not how the real world works, right? Nowhere do we have a situation that we regurgitate or just spew pages and pages of stuff that might be right, hoping that the person who's reading our content is going to cherry pick and say, okay, you got 3 out of the 10 points we were looking for, so okay, 30%. No, it's right or it's wrong. You need to learn to present the truth and be able to defend the truth, right? This is just not happening. There's no incentive to do this if we are letting students get their education through traditional tests and exams. Now, okay, I do have a lot of colleagues in education that have told me there are definitely situations where tests and exams are the best type of assessment, and I completely agree. But it is in these modules, and it's these lecturers and teachers that have to defend why tests and exams are so good, right? It's not our job anymore to say why the innovations are better than traditional tests and exams. It's the tests and exams that have to now start defending themselves. That's how I feel. Okay, so who is this for? I would say any course, any lecturer that experiences any of the problems that I've just mentioned, this is one of the ways to solve it. I would say that it's easy to manage 100 students or less. In fact, it's less painful for me to manage 100 students for this type of teaching and assessment method than it is for me to create exams and mark 100 students' assessments. Okay, I got some good ideas from an international conference a couple of weeks ago about scalability that I will be looking into, because apparently peer assessments of things like portfolios can be just as valuable and valid and reliable as lecturer assessments. Okay, applied or mathematical statistics, it doesn't matter. I've generally looked at applied topics in generalized linear models, as well as theoretical topics in inference and sampling distribution theory. Second year upwards for now, simply because the first year classes are too big, I think in most cases. I have done similar approaches in smaller first year classes, but I think our institutions are under the impression that first year classes, there must be thousands of students no matter what. The first years would be able to handle it, and I think they would be able to appreciate it if you had a small class. Okay, this is for continuous assessment modules. So this is a big sticking point. Perhaps your institution does not allow continuous assessment, right? We have a very reliable setup for continuous assessment modules. We're supposed to have at least six assessments, with not one of those assessments counting more than a quarter of the final mark. So I've set up under these parameters, right? If you do have continuous assessment modules, then it should be using the theory that I present now. You should be able to defend your use of portfolios and interview assessments. Okay, you obviously have to have normal things like learning management systems and that sort of thing. Okay, so which educational theories defend this sort of approach? Well, my paper does. Okay, I've now applied this in statistics, in mathematical statistics. So there is a paper that you can show to your institution to say, look, go and talk to this guy. He will argue with you till the cows come home. Okay, he will die on that hill. And I mean, that should be enough. But if it isn't, we've got lots more theories. Okay, so this is where you can start. And another reason I mention these theories is because this is a new field in statistics education. You can very well choose one of these theories, apply this teaching and assessment method in part or in full in your module, get before and after, pre and post test data from your class, apply one of these theories, any one of these theories I'm about to introduce, and you could get a publication in statistics education. Right, so the theory that I chose was Fink's taxonomy. So I noticed the students did understand a bit more, they communicated more, they retained their knowledge a little bit longer, they had more interest, and they improved their self-reflection and their self-directed learning. And these all tie in with Fink's taxonomy. So that's how I did my study. Okay, I said, look, I have now applied this in terms of Fink's taxonomy, and there was improvement across the board. So this is what Fink's taxonomy looks like. It's the affective side of things plus the standard sort of Bloom's taxonomy side of things of knowledge, understanding, application, analysis and evaluation, and synthesis, all on this side. Okay, and then on the left-hand side, we've got the emotional side of things, how we care about ourselves and others. Do we care about what we're learning, right? Do we actually now have an interest, or are we still apathetic about this? Why are we still apathetic about this? Okay, and then also learning how to become lifelong learners. Okay, so if you don't want to use Fink's taxonomy, there are many, many other theories we can look at. We can look at deep learning, and if we use ChatGPT to define it, it's basically an approach where you promote understanding, okay? Where you take, and this is very important for learning, very, very important for retention, where you have previous information, okay, the knowledge that you have created already, okay, however much or little it is, the new information that you're trying to synthesize is then connected to what you did know, and then an understanding builds of how you might use it in future as well, meaningfully, rather than just simply memorization. Okay, it's about transforming information, all my past and my present, into understanding and the ability to use that knowledge later in new contexts. And I've got a couple of references that can be clicked on at the end of this if you need some papers to start with. but you can also just ask ChatGPT. There's millions of references for deep learning. Okay, what other theories do portfolios and interviews pair nicely with? Engagement. Okay, engagement is all about the desire to learn. Okay, an engaged student is more likely to persist in their educational, let's say, challenges. They're more likely to retain information, they're more likely to achieve, they're more likely to self-regulate their learning. Okay, and it's because they feel like they belong to this module. They want to learn. Portfolios as a method for engagement. There's a couple of references there that you can look at. Okay, but what else? Reflective practice. One of the things that is incredibly important in the portfolio creation process that allows you to prove that you understand something is this writing experience that you do when you reflect on what you have learned. Okay, it is integral to part of the learning process, and you can see this from all of these educational theories. Reflective practice is used everywhere, from experiential learning to constructivism to writing to learn. And here are all this is also from ChatGPT. Here are all the theories that use reflective practice. All right, so you could approach this topic from this point of view if you want to. And the reflective practice is very important, something that science students absolutely hate, but it's something that we do all the time when we are interested in learning. We do our research, right? We create a paper which is synthesizing, collating all this information, and we reflect on how this is useful, right? We bring it together in this picture so that, you know, somebody can take this forward. We reflect, right? And we will be able to have conversations about the paper that we write. It's the same if you've watched an amazing YouTube video. You think about it for a while. You have conversations with other people about what was interesting, and you probably retain that information and tell your students about that amazing video, you know, some other time. That's how learning works, reflective practice. One of the ways that learning works. Okay, but if you don't like that perspective, what about the varied content idea? So this is about universal design for learning, UDL, okay, where it has been debunked that students have particular learning styles. That's apparently not a thing anymore, but that different types of content, okay, audio, visual, that sort of thing, practical experience, different types of content stimulate different types of learning. All right, so this is a cutting edge theory now that the idea of learning styles has been debunked. The idea of different types of content creating different types of learning. And you do have different types of content, because in a portfolio, you will look at textbooks, you'll look at books, you'll look at blogs, you'll look at web tutorials, you'll look at different AIs. Okay, you'll look at academic papers if you've got a very good student, right? And you learn about research, you learn about collecting this information, organizing it, and then sourcing it, if not referencing it. Okay, you don't have to force them to reference. Let's just get it in their heads that, okay, they've used AI, they must say they've used AI with a particular prompt. Just source it. Okay, that's at least a step in the right direction. By the time they get to honors, they should be able to research. Okay, what else? This is something that I really enjoy, is this idea of defending the truth, right? When I handed in my thesis, okay, my master's thesis, I had to pay thousands of rands to bind my thesis to give to the assessor, right? This cost me a couple of months' groceries. I made sure that the things that I said in that thesis were correct because I didn't want to have to do it again. This is the idea of handing in the truth and defending the truth rather than waffling. On Afrikaans, gorrel. Okay. So this is about student self-regulated learning and self-assessment. And I'm doing a project now on self-assessment within this structure that that shows, how important it is. Corrections are always considered, which is constructivism. Okay, Vygotsky's constructivism. And constructivism and dialogue go hand in hand, right? The idea of correcting and building, okay? Making interviews important. So being able to talk to one's understanding of a subject, to be able to query a student about their understanding is really important in building an education. Okay, but what else? Flexible design. We can look at how disruptions are easily dodged. We just go online if we have to. Okay, if you don't go online, then you have a class. If you have AI, if you have online problems, then you have a face-to-face class. Artificial intelligence is not a threat because hopefully you will be teaching the students that the artificial intelligence product is not the end product that's getting the mark. It's one's experience of the generative AI content that is assessed at the end of the day. And what about authentic assessment? Okay, this is of course way more authentic than a traditional written test or exam. Even for statisticians, we write reports. We have assessments within the portfolio that are like reports. We, when we are doing a thesis, we get together a whole bunch of information and we put it in an orderly fashion. This is what a portfolio is. Okay, we reflect on what we've put together. This is what a portfolio is. The oral communication is what they will be doing, hopefully, for the rest of their lives. They'll be talking to other people about their knowledge, about their understanding in different areas. Okay. Right, so authentic assessment is a huge one, and it's one of the ways that you could approach implementing this type of learning and assessment. But there's other theories as well, some very interesting things. Somebody from our English department gave a talk on note-taking and how the act of writing down notes on a particular topic, taking those notes into an assessment, and then recalling from those notes is actually a form of or promotes knowledge retention. It's called the recall hypothesis. We just had a talk last week from Prof. Johan Ferreira about storytelling, that some of the greatest life lessons that we remember across generations, we remember because of how well they were told in stories, right? So storytelling can be used within portfolios. If you want to go the decolonization route, you can as well, because you are decolonizing the pedagogy. Everybody is on the same footing. We are not a lecturer giving the content, okay, above the student body. We are all in a horizontal structure, in a horizontal network, giving information, accepting information from all different places, right? You get to choose what knowledge is, okay, how your knowledge is created. One class might choose to create knowledge on their own at their computers, like a very Western society. Another class might like to debate in the class, right, in order to get certain topics across. And of course, they get to choose whatever content they want to explain the learning outcomes. Okay, but we also have some other even weirder theories. Okay, if you want to talk about how the hippocampus works on creating long-term memories, and the fact that you cannot do this if you do not sleep. You cannot create long-term memories if you don't sleep. And what do students do if we give them written tests and exams? They wait until the week before the test and exam, and then they cram, and they don't sleep that entire week. You cannot create memories this way. The portfolio is a regular process that allows them to build knowledge over time. And I've talked about this a couple of times, exams as trauma therapy. You have this trauma of trying to learn for the exam. It gets stuck as a pathway in your brain, and then you go into the exam to recall this trauma, and you actually loosen the pathways, and then you go on holiday, and you rather think about that event becomes rather thinking about the holiday that you had. So you remember that time in your life where you had this terrible, terrible trauma, but you also remember, oh, it was such a nice holiday afterwards. You don't remember anything about, the trauma. This is how positive psychologists get rid of traumas, right? So you loosen those neural connections in the exam time, and you breathe some fresh air into it, literally at the sea, and that's all you remember. Okay. Right. So those are the theories. Now you've got lots of backing if you want to do some research in portfolios and interviews, or if you just need backup to tell your teaching and learning authorities that this is what you're going to do. Okay. So how do we implement this? What you need is you need a guide on how a student might make a portfolio, right? So this will be a comprehensive guide, and I have examples of all of these things that could be used. In fact, that paper that was published has got a repository with all of these things, even example portfolios. You will need a course guide, and as you query AI in your classes and generate new notes over the years, this course guide will grow. You will then also make available, possible interview questions. What sort of things you might ask a student in an interview. 50% of your interview questions will come from these known alternatives, and then 50% will come from new things that you saw in their portfolios or directions for questioning that you want to take, during each student's unique interview. And then you give them the rubric, because this is the first way to scaffold self-assessment, is show them, look, right at the beginning, this is what you're aiming for. Okay, then you have teaching time. And I would say a third or a quarter of your teaching time will be spent on new content. Okay, the difficult things, the things that are difficult to grasp. But most of the time, the students will prepare for class and come to class with questions. You will have enough time to spend probably an hour a week or half an hour a week just on life skills, just on turning your students into lifelong learners. And then you will also have one online session where you practice critiquing portfolios. So the students will on a weekly basis upload their portfolios, and then you'll pick a few portfolios every week, 5 or 6, and you will just quickly flip through them in the online class, and they will get used to the online environment where you're going to be interviewing them. Did I miss something? Yeah, no, that's it. Okay. Content-wise, what goes into a portfolio? Well, the obvious answer is everything that would have gone into a good student's study notes. Right. So that essentially means that we are now giving students marks for creating their study notes rather than memorizing them. So you'll have textbook and module guide content, learning outcomes. You'll have the definitions, the theorems, and the proofs that they've gone through, and reflection on all of these things, how they felt about doing these things. That personality must be in the portfolio. You'll have exercises and problems with solutions. And then, of course, generative AI content that has been engaged with. Okay, and if all of the copy-pasted material is removed, there must be enough left over that you are convinced the student understands the content. All right, so that's where self-reflection comes in, or reflection comes in. the personality, the personalized voice of the writing, that sort of thing. Assignments, even the personality within collation of information can be seen, all right, as evidence of learning. You'll have assignments, so you will stick to a traditional structure in this way because no matter where they go in life, they will have tasks that need to be done and reported on. So your assignments will be structured in that way. What are the tasks that they do in the workplace, the small tasks that need to be reported on, and generate reports in that way. Then the most difficult to self-assess, I've just found out, is the extra material section. So students don't know what should go into this extra material, and there should be an explicit guide. So tutorials that you find online, especially for applied statistics, programming, that sort of thing. Programming that the students do themselves or get from online sources, tutorial videos, explanatory videos, stories about the methods, histories. I mean, the story of William Seeley Gossett not being able to publish the tea distribution under his own name. The fact that he was at the Guinness Brewery and he had to publish it under the name student. That's a story. The Challenger disaster is a story, right? It's a tragic story about the misuse of regression. These stories can go into a portfolio. Mind maps. A lot of students draw mind maps. Answers to potential interview questions. They can ask AI for interview questions and ask AI for answers to these questions. And then very, very important, class activities. All right. This is how you make your portfolio unique from year to year. And I give a few examples. And of course, reflections on everything. If you copy and paste, if you copy a video link or you copy a screenshot of a video that you link to the original video, there must be a reflection of what you learned from that video. So that if you look at your portfolio in 10 years' time and that link has disappeared, you know the sort of video that you watched. Okay, this video was great because they explained in this sort of a way and it helped me understand the link with another topic, for example. And for the first time, I've put a limit on the size of the portfolios. 120 pages it's a doable limit. It also counters the AI because the AI doesn't know how to summarize as well as a human does at this stage. So 120 page limit is easily accessible. And yeah, it just makes, I've had 300-page portfolios that become a bit of a drag. I mean, your scrolly finger, when you're going through one portfolio every 20 minutes, your scrolly finger gets a little bit painful. Okay. So for class activities, you get the students to come to class. It shows attendance, that sort of thing. And one of the activities I like to do is the one-pager, where I give the students one single A4 page. I do this 3 times during the semester, and I tell them, write down everything you know about the module. Okay, so they've got 30 minutes to write down absolutely everything they know about the module up to that point. And of course, they all do terribly in the first one, which is after a few weeks. It's basically just a list of the topics that they've done, okay, in order. But as they understand the meaning of this task, they start to structure the framework of the module on this one-pager and fill in the gaps as you go lower in the structure. So first it's high-level topics, and then if they've got time, they fill in their understanding on these structured, well-structured topics. So the idea is, if you were to meet somebody that could change your life in this field, hire you for your dream job, working at Google or whatever, would you be able to tell this person your knowledge about this topic in 3 minutes or less? So it's about structuring your thoughts, understanding the entire module as a whole entity, and being able to, impart that knowledge in a very short time. So that's what the one-pager is about. Also a great exercise for the lecturer to make sure that your unit or your course is one cohesive unit. So the one-pager goes into the portfolio 3 times. I don't assess it. They reflect on what they were missing. So you'll often get this, realization after the first one-pager, and then they will congratulate themselves after the second one, and after the third one, they're like, yeah, I knew what was coming. I could do this quite easily. Quizzes, I let the students do the quizzes together. If they're going to cheat, let them cheat. They still learn, actually. You break a lot of friendships by letting them do it together, because they don't trust anybody after letting or having their teammates let them down. Homework research questions. So 1 year I might ask them about what's the difference between doing a GLM on log normal data and doing a normal regression on logged normal data. Okay, so you can ask them different questions in different years. Some questions are good enough to go into the syllabus, some aren't. But at least each year you've got something different, and it differentiates the portfolios from year to year. And then you can add odd things. 1 year I asked my students on their front page to discuss why they felt they were better than machines. Okay, but the next year I didn't. So when the next year the student had that discussion, I knew, okay, they're copying somebody else's portfolio. 1 year I asked them about their favorite quotes, and some of them put them in their portfolios and reflected on them. This year I've asked my students to do data set simulation. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Okay. Right, next step. How do we assess this? Now we know what goes into a portfolio. How do we assess this? Well, the portfolio itself has to be assessed, and the interview has to be assessed. I've said that it has to be continuous assessment in the sort of grand scheme of things. I don't think you could get away with this sort of structure if your university forces examinations. But if your university forces examinations, you can invite me over to speak to the authorities there, and I'll tell them what for. Okay. 2 interviews, mid-semester and end of semester, 2 portfolio reviews. Very important. This is not a once-off assessment. Okay, so I've got 2 rubrics that get marked, plus a class participation mark, plus some assignment drafts. How does that fit into the things not being more than 25% of the final mark? I've done a good calculation breakdown. When you split up your rubric into separate parts, you can argue that different things are assessed at different times, and nothing counts eventually more than 25% of the final mark. Okay, so mathematically, if you've got a good solid rubric, you will be able to argue that this is continuous assessment. And it is. It absolutely is. So here's what the rubric looks like. 25% of your portfolio is content, right? So in the grand scheme of things, it's 25% of 40% of the mark. That is content. Okay, in the final assessment. Okay, corrections, very important for some of those educational theories. I also find that it's a great way to see the students, which students actually really care about the feedback I gave them in the first interview, and which students, just are just coasting through. Whether or not the student will be able to utilize this portfolio given a new problem in future, and then the interview counts 1/5 of each mark, 25% or 20%, depending on which interview it is, the first or the second. Okay. So how do we do this? We set up a schedule a week before the interviews where the students book 30-minute appointments. Apparently Microsoft bookings is something I could implement because we've got Microsoft licenses, but there's many different ways to do this. I use Blackboard and it's actually a bit of a pain in the butt, so I would prefer some automated way to do the interview booking. Each student books a 30-minute interview. They submit their portfolios at the start of the 2-week interview process, all at the same time. And the night before the interview, I assess the portfolio according to the rubric and their previous feedback. This takes a maximum of 20 minutes per portfolio. In the beginning, when you're getting used to this, maybe it will take 30 minutes, but you will get the hang of this very, very quickly. Yes, I am working in the evenings and then I have a full day of interviews the next day, but it's okay. I'm not having to mark, right? I'm not having to mark line by line, which, like I said, is absolutely soul destroying. And I know that every piece of feedback I give is going to be heard by the students. So during the interview, you make sure you record the session so that you can give a student their own recording after the interview sessions. Okay. If a student was coached by a classmate, you will know. They will give you your answer back, because like I say, if a student doesn't answer correctly, you provide immediate feedback. So you give them your answer. And if you hear the word that you used in your answer that nobody else has been using, you know immediately. Okay, there are thousands of ways that you will know whether or not a student was coached. And if the student was coached, you just go in a different direction with your questions. There are hundreds of questions that you can ask for any module. So you can definitely have enough lines of questioning that should you be suspicious that a student was coached, that you can go in a reliable and valid direction in your questioning for that student. You can then evaluate the disparity between the interview and the portfolio. This is why the two have to be used together. You might have a brilliant portfolio and a terrible interview, and this should not be happening. Okay, either the portfolio was copied from somewhere, or the student has got major interview anxiety, and either of these problems needs to be addressed. That said, if the student has a brilliant understanding and can take any line of questioning in their stride, but their portfolio is garbage, that is also something that needs to be addressed. Okay, that disparity needs to be corrected after the first interview. After the questions, I go through the feedback that I've given them on their portfolio rubric, giving them a chance to argue against my marking, okay, if they can provide evidence. And often I miss things. Oh, I didn't see your class activities. No. Here it is on this page. And then I give them the marks. Okay, there's no 5-day thing in general. Out of 100 students, I might have one student coming back to me after the fact and saying, listen, I don't think so. Most of the students correct their marks during the interview. Okay. Quality control. Well, plagiarism and cheating is easily managed so far because all the old portfolios are stored on the system and they are compared against, right, with Turnitin for the final assessment. Interviews are self-regulating because they have the interview in a video if they want it, right? They can share their interviews with each other and see that they were treated fairly. I'm not stopping them. They are welcome to do that. And that ensures fairness, validity, and reliability. It is self-regulating. Okay, I don't believe in annual moderating at all. I feel like moderating should be bounty hunting instead. There should be a reward where you can go to other institutions and moderate a paper, and if you find discrepancies, you get a reward. Okay, it's a dog-eat-dog world. I think this patting each other on the back doing moderation is terrible. I hate the practice. I absolutely hate it. I must have the worst moderation record. My moderation record is publication. There, have that. Okay. Okay, on a personal note, I'm much happier after making these changes to portfolios and interviews. The burden of proof lies with the student and they appreciate it. They like it. If they work consistently, they stress less, they learn more, and my workload is less, okay? Even though I have very hectic 2-week periods, mid-semester and end of semester. Each student gets one-on-one time, and they get instantaneous feedback. And the assessment process is a learning experience for them and for me. And now there's nothing that I do with my students that is meaningless. Absolutely everything goes into the portfolio, and they will have that forever. Okay, and there are definite reflections. The portfolio is reflected in real life learning. Okay, we learn in the same way as we created the portfolio. This is just a truth. Okay, and I've got lots of references here that you can go and look at if you would like to do research in this area. But that said, that is my story. Do we have any questions? Any comments? Thank you for listening to my story. And now I have a recording that I can share with everyone. Thank you very much. No questions. Was it all very clear?
Michael, Andre, yeah.
Hi, Andre.
Will this work with other subjects, like, say, for instance, with law and other areas, totally different disciplines?
Yeah, I'm sure it could. I'm sure it could. If you can see like case studies coming into things, applications, theory, mixtures of content in your module, then absolutely. I think it could work anywhere. I would just have to sit down and you know, apply my mind a little with that lecturer to see how it could work. But anywhere where you might talk about your knowledge in future, a portfolio would work.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
I really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Andre.
Sorry, Michael, I have a very noisy background.
No worries.
But I wanted to ask, when you are having the interviews, can the students consult their portfolio
Yes,
in
they
front
can.
of them?
Yeah,
Okay, so
they can.
at that point, they're not trying to remember by heart, but they can get a refresher and then explain their understanding there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
They're very nervous. So second years are very, very nervous in interviews. So they like to have notes with them.
Yeah. I feel like this is really preparing a much better PhD student, because it's essentially they put together a document, which is a thesis, and then they have to defend it at the end. So
yeah,
it's such a great idea.
well, that's the point.
Yeah.
It's more true to further learning.
Yeah. Yeah. It will be a tough one to get other universities to change.
Yeah.
So
it will be tough. It will be tough. But this is my next task, is to make it easier. So this talk was the start of building a guide.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. And keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. All right. If we have no further questions, I just want to say thanks for your time. I appreciate it. And hopefully we will upload this video at some stage to the SASA YouTube. Okay. Cheers, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.